Okay, so for example 1, we're going to write each trigonometric ratio as a fraction and as a decimal rounded to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is we have the sign of J. Okay, so we're looking at angle J first. So I'm going to color this in blue. And we're going to label what parts of the triangle are going to be true for J. Now, the hypotenuse, Zoe, for this one, what's the hypotenuse going to be?
11.
No, what were you going to say first?
61.
Okay, why were you going to say that?
Because it's across from the right angle.
Yeah, so that's correct. Okay, so the hypotenuse is always going to be across from the right angle. Okay, now we're going to label the opposite side and the adjacent side. Okay, so Elisa, what's the opposite side?
J.
Yep.
6.
Okay, and how do you know that?
Because it's opposite.
Okay, and we just find opposite as the side that is what?
Cross.
Across from it, yep, or not touching angle J, right? Now 11 is the only side left, so that is going to be the adjacent side. Okay, so now when I'm setting up the sign of J, remember I can use the so part of SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so the sign of J is going to equal O over H. That's where that comes from. Okay, so now what we're going to do is plug in our numbers. So the sign of J, we're going to plug in the opposite and the hypotenuse. So our opposite is 60. That's going to go on top. Our hypotenuse is 61. That's going to go on the bottom. Okay, so this is what the ratio would be as a fraction, and it says and as a decimal rounded to the nearest hundredth. So to do that, we can just simply go to our calculator and do 60 divided by 61, and we're going to round that to the nearest hundredth. So the hundredth spot is how many places after the decimal? 2, so 0.98, and then look at the next one. So it's a 3, which means my decimal is going to stay what?
8.
Yeah, it's going to stay at the 8. Okay, and then for B, I'm going to do the cosine of J. So the cosine is the ka part of SOHCAHTOA, which means the cosine of the angle is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Okay, so Robert, do you think you can tell me what that fraction is?
That would be 11 over 61.
Yep, good. 11 over 61. So 11 is my adjacent side, and then 61 is the hypotenuse. Isn't it nice to have these labeled from the beginning so you can look at those and then plug them in? Yeah, Brenna?
How do you know that it's A over H?
That by the definition. So the cosine, it's the ratio of the length of the adjacent leg.
Oh, it's on that side. Oh.
Yeah, yep. So that's what the ka part of the SOHCAHTOA is going to be. Yeah. And when you guys divide, did you guys all get a chance to do that? Divide it? Okay, so Leo, what'd you get for that? Okay, good. Yep, 0.18. Okay. Now for C, it says the tangent, but it's not of J, it's of what? K. So now I'm going to color in this in a different color. And what is always going to stay the same? The hypotenuse. So my hypotenuse is still here, but now I'm looking at this angle. Okay, so if I'm looking at this angle, the side 60 is going to be what side? Nope, so hypotenuse is always going to stay the same. Hypotenuse is always going to be across from the right angle. So this is a leg, right? The legs are either going to be opposite or adjacent. So if I'm looking at this angle here, is this adjacent or is it opposite? Okay, yeah, because what does adjacent mean? Next to. Okay, so then for the angle K, this is my adjacent and this is my opposite. So really what happened with those two sides? Yeah, they just switched places. Okay, and then this makes up the TOA part. So the tangent of K is going to be the opposite over the adjacent. Tank.
Yeah.
Okay, so Connor, what's my fraction going to be?
11 over 6.
Good. And for this one, you don't have to do it, but if you could reduce this fraction, you would. And then, Kayla, did you divide those already? Will you let me know what you got?
11 divided by 60 is 0.18.
Good. Okay, very good. Do you guys have any questions for me? Ready for the next one? Okay, example 3, we're going to calculate trigonometric ratios. And for this part, we are going to use our calculator to find each trig ratio. And again, we're going to be rounding to the nearest hundredth. Now, notice that this here, what is this symbol?
Degree.
Degrees. So most of your calculators are already going to be in this mode, degree. But I know some of you guys do have a graphing calculator. And you do want to make sure if you go to your mode, which is at the top here, there's 2 different modes it could be in, radians or degrees. And so if it's not in degree, go ahead and highlight it, press enter, and then you'll know that you're in the correct one. What's that?
It just has a lot of words.
Oh, yeah, so Brenna, yours has radian highlighted.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so now you're gonna arrow over to degree and then highlight that. Got it?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is let's find where the trig ratios are. Can you guys find where the sine button is?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna do the sine of 52, and we're gonna round that to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so then did you guys get 0.78? Okay, so this will be 0.78.
Wouldn't you round up to 0.7?
Oh, thanks, yes. And actually, I'm gonna write this out, 0.788. Okay, so then we're gonna look at this and round it up, 0.79, nice job. Okay, do you guys think you can do the other 2 on your own?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So for this one, now you're only looking at the one that's directly behind it. Okay, so don't worry, I say don't worry about the domino effect. It's not like they're all gonna round up. You just look at the one directly behind it, and then is this gonna round up or stay 4?
Round up.
Round up.
Wait, I thought you were supposed to do it to the 10th and then you kept going and then
No.
like the 10th.
Nope, so whatever place you round it to, you're looking at the number directly behind that. And then the last one is the tangent of 65. Katie, did you get that one?
The third one?
Yeah, do you have a calculator?
I got 2.144.
Oh, good. Okay, so we're gonna round that to 2.14, right? Because it said the hundreds place. Okay, good. Okay, let's go to the next page.
Oh, man.
Okay, so for example 4, we're gonna find each length, and then we're going to round our answers to the nearest hundred. So what we're trying to find is BC. So what I do is I label my BC as my X. Okay, because that's what I'm trying to find. Okay, and then the next thing that I'll do is I will label according to whatever angle they give me. So for this one, you're given angle B. So now what I want to do is I want to label everything according to angle B. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is label. Yeah, Brenna?
You want to pick C because C is 90 degrees.
It'll never be the 90-degree angle. So it won't work if you do the 90-degree because you're always going to have whatever's across from the 90 as your hypotenuse. And that's a good question. Okay, so you're never going to use the right angle. You have to be able to have the right angle in order to use SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so because we're given B and not A, well really, you could use A if you did what? Yeah, if you subtracted it from 180, you could absolutely do that. Just because this is given, this is what we'll use. So now I'm going to label what we have. So I have this side, the 10.2. Julian, what side is that compared to angle B?
It's AC.
I know, but is it opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse?
Oh, it's opposite.
Okay, good. So I'm going to label that O. Okay, so for step 1, you're going to label your sides. Okay, the next one I'm trying to find BC. And Preston, this side is what? I know, but is it opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? No, because remember our opposite is not going to touch it. That's going to be our 10.2. So what, tell me again? Yep, it has to be the adjacent. And we know it's not the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse is always where?
It is from the
Yeah, across from the right angle. Okay, so I have O and I'm trying to find A. So what I can do is decide what trig function I'm going to use. If I have O and A, what trig function am I going to use? Yeah, the T, right?
Yes.
Okay, so decide what trig function to use. Okay, so for this, since we have sides O and A, we will use the tangent of B equals the opposite over the adjacent. And then step 3 is going to be set up your trig equation. Do you think you could set up your trig equation? Okay, so we're going to start with the tangent. And then, Michaela, what is my B value? Yeah, it's 15 degrees, right? So it's the tangent of 15 degrees equals, and then, Caitlin, what's my fraction going to be?
10.2 over X.
Good. So now I have to solve this for X. So I'm going to put and solve. Set up trig equation and solve. Okay, so if I'm going to solve this for X, yeah, Connor, were you going to tell me something or do you have a question?
Why do we use the tangent and how much the center costs?
Well, the sine or the cosine, right? Okay, so because if you were going to use the sine or the cosine, what value would I have to have?
Oh, the sides.
Yeah, I'd have to have I have the O and the A, but what don't I have?
Hypotenuse.
The hypotenuse. Okay, so you don't want two unknowns. We're using this because I have to find BC, and that's why I called BCX.
So then if you had the hypotenuse, you would use the hypotenuse and A, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. So then you'd use the cosine. Okay, so now we're going to solve this. Do you guys know how to solve it if the variable's on the bottom?
Don't you like multiply by reciprocal?
What does it say?
I think you can
Nothing.
set up trig.
multiply by the 10.
Oh, set up your trig equation and solve. Okay, so what can you do to this equation? I'm gonna show you how to do it using algebra, and then I'll show you the shortcut. Do you guys know what you'd want to do first here?
Maybe simplify it to
You could. You're trying to get x by itself, right? You don't want it in the denominator, so what could you do to get it out of the denominator? Yeah, multiply both sides by x. So if you multiply both sides by x, you'd have x times the tangent of 15 degrees equals 10.2. And then you would divide by the tangent of 15 degrees to get x by itself. So the equation that you're solving is x equals 10.2 divided by the tangent of 15 degrees. Which, let's compare these two equations. What happened? Yeah, see how the x and the tangent of 15 switch places? Whenever x is on the bottom, that will always happen. Huh?
Do you even have to solve the equation, or can you just like flip them?
You can just flip them from now, but just show me that this is your equation. So then what we're going to do is 10.2 divided by the tangent of 15. Okay, so Emma, can you do this with me, please? Okay, I have a bunch of. Okay, and then it said round to the nearest what?
100.
Hundredth, so this will be 0.07. Okay, so that's going to be your x value. And in this case, it's feet, so this will be 38.07 feet.
Okay, this is fun.
Yeah, this is really important because it is something that you're going to keep using.
This is way better. This is way better than
No.
Yeah, I like this.
Okay, so the next one, we're trying to find QR. So what should I label QR with?
X,
Good.
Y, Z, W.
No.
You should label it K.
Okay, so now what I want you to try to do is, do you think you can label this with the O and the A and the H?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it. So the first thing you should do is decide what angle you're going to be going off of. Yeah, good. You're going to be going off of angle P. Okay, so you have the 12.9. Caitlin, what do you think? What's that going to be? It is. How did you know? Good. Okay, so the hypotenuse because it's opposite of the right angle. Okay, and then the x, is that going to be O or A? O. All right, so then what I want to do is ask myself which one of the trig functions uses O and H?
Sin.
The sign, right? We don't want to sin, so we sign, okay? All right, so the sign is what we are going to use. So let's set up our equation. Do you guys want me to write out that I will. Okay, so the sine of P is going to equal the opposite over the hypotenuse, and then we'll plug in our values from there. Okay, so the P is the angle measure. What's our angle measure? 63. Okay, our opposite side is what? Nope.
X.
X, yep, and then the hypotenuse is 12.9. So this is set up a little bit differently. So if I want to solve for x, what would I do to both sides? Multiply by 12.9, right? Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you in the next step. So if I multiply both sides by 12.9, then what I'm going to get is x equals 12.9 times the sine of 63 degrees. Okay, so this is what I use to help myself remember. I know if the variable's on top, I'm going to multiply my two values. And if my variable's on the bottom, what did we do last time?
Flip them.
We ended up,
Take it.
it's a fraction, right? So we did what with them?
Multiply.
Divide it, okay? So you divide if the variable's on the bottom, you multiply if the variable's on the top. Okay? All right, and then Ahmed, what did you get for your final answer? Okay, so we're gonna do the 12.9 times the sum of 63. Let's do 63. And then the sum. Yep, and then do times 12.9. Good. Okay, so what's that gonna be? Then we're gonna round to the nearest hundredth? So nearest hundred? Nearest hundred? You keep telling me the tenth. You said 11.5.
It's 11.49, so it would be 11.5.
I know, but it's 11.493, right? So the nearest hundredth is going to be the second one, right? So then you'll keep it. But if this was 5 or above, it would be 11.50. Okay, good. Go ahead. Question. I can't hear you. Okay, so let's finish this. So FD is going to be our X. How many of you already did finish this one?
We can do it.
Yeah.
Get that one more.
No. Okay, so X is going to be your FD, and then we're using 39.
It's gonna be the cosine system. We haven't used.
But we know that this is the adjacent and this is the hypotenuse. So we're going to set up the cosine of F equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So the cosine of 39 degrees equals 20 over X. So because it's on the bottom, we're going to do what operation? Divide. So X equals 20 over the cosine of 39 degrees. Oh, and let's label the last one. I think this was centimeters, 11.49 centimeters. And, yeah, Lisa?
When we have done like the opposite side of F.
You mean like with D?
25.7.
Yes, you could if you subtracted those from 180.
Isn't it like